Accountability is super important with motion because until you get them to consistently start moving on their own, you can teach them all you want, but it doesn't really matter. So I think you'll find that most students move fairly easily, and there's a couple reasons why they might not. Number one, they might have some coordination issues, and they might be embarrassed by that. Or they might, have some other kind of self-esteem issues with it. They think moving is silly, and so they just refuse to move. This is a generalization, but you might find this more common with young boys because they don't have as much exposure to things like dance, gymnastics, and that kind of thing. So they might not have developed that sort of coordination yet. And when they see other people moving, they might sort of think of it as more of a feminine thing to do, and so they say, no, I'm not going to do that. So this is where your established values in the hierarchy can really help out, because you want to make motion a part of your value system, and you want to make an environment that rewards motion. I was watching a documentary the other day on zebras, and these researchers went into Africa and they started studying zebras, and zebras are hard to study because you're trying to track a zebra, and then you make a notation and then you look back up, oh, where'd that zebra go? It's really hard to distinguish one zebra from the other. And that's kind of the way they evolved. Instead of camouflaging into their environment, like a lot of animals in Africa where they're a tan color or they're a certain color to match the environment, they're camouflaged within the herd with black and white stripes. So what happened was they started tagging zebras so that they can track them individually. And, guess what happened? I saw it happening before I saw the next part of the video. I could probably guess as to what was going to happen. If you want, you can pause the video and see if you can guess what's going to happen next in this story. But yeah, that's right. The ones that were tagged stuck out from the herd, and they were eaten almost immediately by predators. That one little thing that they had that was different from the herd left them vulnerable. And so think about this when we're teaching motion. You want the students that aren't moving to kind of stand out, and you want to make them comfortable moving so that they kind of blend in with the herd, and they don't look silly for moving. In fact, it's the opposite. They look silly for not moving. So getting the majority of your students to start moving is really important. And also, you want to do some peer-to-peer coaching too, just to make sure they're moving back and forth. If they're really uncoordinated, you might have to physically move them. You might have to, nudge them in the right direction. And it's important to ask your students, because they might have a shoulder injury, they might have something that you're not aware of. Hey, is it okay if I move you and I show you how to move? And they say, yeah, that's okay. And then you start moving them and they kind of figure out how it works. And that works also very well for students that move in the wrong direction. They move with the bow instead of against the bow. You can kind of nudge them in the right direction so that they start moving, and you get them to start moving where they need to go. Now, I'm not sure exactly how long we're going to be able to do this in the classrooms. There might become a point where physical contact with the students is just outlawed entirely, and then it's going to make things more difficult to teach, but still not impossible, and we'll just have to update our teaching practices. We'll just have to evolve with the classroom environment. Verbal cues might also help your students to move. If you simply say move, and if you make that verbal cue, your students should know what they're not doing, and it just reminds them to move, because a lot of times they're focused on something else. They're focused usually on the left hand, and you say move, and then they all know what you're talking about, and they all start moving. Oh yeah, that's right, and they all start moving again, and they respond to your verbal cues. Having a good system of verbal cues is great, because you don't have to stop rehearsal and then lecture, oh, okay, we need to move, we need to do this and that. It just takes a lot of time out of rehearsal. If we have established verbal cues and we just say move and they know what we're talking about, then we don't have to stop. They can keep going. And if they don't respond to your verbal cues, then you want to stop and say, hey, when I say move, I mean we have to establish motion, move against the bow, and then maybe do a couple of exercises just to remind them, and then get back to it in the music. I remember early on in my teaching career, I was working with a cello teacher named Benjamin Ponder, who taught a couple of my students, and he was the principal cellist in the Valley Symphony Orchestra. And at the time he was into Baroque cello, and he was I think they were doing like some Baroque music in the Valley Symphony. And to make it more authentic, he was performing some of these pieces without an end pin, which I thought was really interesting. And I thought what was even more interesting is that he was having his students perform without end pins too. And I thought, like, why is this happening? Why is he having his students perform without end pins? Well, if you think about it, that really, if you don't have an end pin and, the cell's just not stuck in the ground, it really has an effect on the way your setup is. You have to be set up a certain way and you have to be able to move a certain way. Otherwise, your cell's going to fall down. This layer of accountability probably works best with your advanced cellist. I wouldn't recommend this for a beginning cellist at all. I wouldn't recommend this for a cellist that can barely keep their instrument from falling, even with the end pin. You want to make sure they're very coordinated, and maybe there's just something in their technique that you're looking to correct or improve, and you probably don't want to do it with the entire cello section either. Maybe just one student at a time, to get them comfortable. And then, of course, go back. If you're playing a non-Baroque piece of music, go back to the end pin. Another good layer of accountability can be having your violinists and violists just stand up. Get them out of the chair, get them standing up. It makes it easier to move, and it makes it easier to transfer the weight when their center of mass is directly under their feet. You have shoulders over hips, over feet, and everything just lines up a lot better that way when you're looking to adjust your center of mass. With your bass players, it's going to probably be the hardest to do anything like that. Trying to play the bass without an end pin, I don't think is going to work. You can try to maybe have your basses change from a sitting position to a standing position if you don't already have your basses standing, and that might make the difference. But then going back down to that seated position or that 1 foot up, 1 foot down position, like most bass players playing, that's going to change things quite a bit. So what you might want to do in that case is make some special adjustments for your bass players so that they can have that accountability to move. We have 4 demonstration videos in this episode, and all 4 of them are things that I use in the classroom to get my students to move, and I think all 4 of them are appropriate at all levels. So you might want to check those out and maybe consider incorporating them into your classroom too. You can pair them up with some peer-to-peer student accountability, and really try to not just teach them these exercises, but give them a purpose to make sure that they're doing this on their own, because it really does them no good to learn in the classroom and then they go away and they don't move. But I think once you get that established and once your students start moving, they're going to be able to feel the difference, they're going to like how it feels, and they're going to be able to hear the difference in the sound, and that's something that they're going to perpetuate on their own. So I hope you enjoyed these demonstration videos, and I hope you enjoyed this episode on motion.